Take an ugly wall that needs something and decide to make a mosaic. That's what I did. It began with having a design in mind, and I tried a few different variations. I used Photoshop to see what it would look like, and eventually I decided this design would work. Now it was a question of gathering materials, ordering tiles, figuring out the color proportions, which was kind of a challenge to know how much of each color I would use because I wasn't really sure. This was my first big mosaic. I'd only done small things like a picture frame or, I know, filling in a space somewhere. You have to have a smooth surface if you want your mosaic to come out well. My husband luckily helped me with this phase. We used spackle, we sanded, and then we used this product that you see pictured here. This creates a better adhesion for the mosaic tiles. The last thing you want is for them to fall off. Once the wall was dry, I blocked off and sketched out in pencil the approximate positions where I wanted all the motifs to go. Next came the challenge of cutting all the pieces down to the sizes that I would need and then arranging them. Here's a short video that shows the technique I used for cutting the tiles.
Welcome to my makeshift studio in our greenhouse. I'm in the process of cutting glass to make little tiles so that I can put a mosaic up on the wall. I have a wonderful tool here for cutting glass that my husband bought. And I'm currently cutting a lot of white pieces because my mosaic will have a lot of white. There are other colors though that I have. Here's a wonderful green. Most of the tiles that I bought that are glass that need cutting are Tiffany style. There's little striations of color in them. I set them down on this platform here. I have devised a shim because this tile cutter machine was designed for a 1/4 inch tile, and my tile is 1/8 inch. I have it all kind of marked out for my lengths, the width of the tile. I raise this lever here. There's a little cutting blade that I periodically oil to keep it in good cutting condition. And I just have a little Q-tip and I swab the blade. Oops, there's the blade. Excuse me. Now, I bring this forward and I pull back this. There's a cutting bar here that gets in the way, so I kind of pull it out of the way with my hand so that I can set the blade exactly where I want it to go. And then I push forward. You hear that wonderful ripping sound? That means it's making good contact. Now when I press down, the cutting bar snaps the glass and I end up with two wonderful pieces. This one, eventually I'll be cutting that into smaller squares. I do a variety of sizes. Most of the sizes I will need will be 3/4 inch, but sometimes I'll need smaller pieces to fit in, or depending on how I work it in the design. So I'm collecting them in 2 different sizes. Here are a lot of greens that I cut yesterday. You see here I have a small green tile. So that works great. I can take this cardboard off periodically and shake it out into the trash. I'm a little bit concerned about all the little glass dust and slivers. So far, no splinters yet. Another thing that I do, once I make my mosaics, I have to take something to shape them and make them smaller. And this is better for big cuts, but for small cuts I use these nippers.
The nippers. They're pretty easy to use. I turned a plastic bin on its side and cut holes in the lid so that I could use them safely without little glass slivers going everywhere, and I totally got over my fear of working with glass. Here you see tofu containers filled with all the tiles ready to go. This is basically my mosaic palette. You can also see a little trial setup I did there. I really couldn't wait to get started. Here I lay out a corner motif. I wanted to start with an area that wasn't prominent in the design in case I really flubbed up. I played around with how it would look with the background tiles on. But the problem really is how to get it from flat on a table up on the wall. I wanted to work as much as I could in the flat. I had some clear choice overhead transparencies with adhesive on the back that I press down on my carefully arranged tiles to hold them in position. Then using this weld bond adhesive, it's PVC, it's kind of like using just white glue. I would flip the plastic over and put little dots on the back of the tiles. This way I didn't have to even worry about working in mirror image and reverse and backwards and all that. Here you can see it already adhered to the wall. Now the question is, how do we go from the flat to the wall? Mosaic mesh is the answer. Once that glue is on the back of the tile, you put this mesh there and let it dry. That way you can lift all those tiles with the gaps between all ready for the grout. Once I collected a lot of these motifs, I needed to move them around to dry, so I found setting the mesh with the glue and the tiles on parchment paper that's used for baking. This way I could stack them, move them around, and be sure that the glue wouldn't be sticking to the tabletop or some paper or something like that. It was a really, I felt, very clever idea that I had there. Occasionally the tiles would pop off, the adhesive didn't quite hold. Just had to redo it. All kinds of annoying things happened over the process of doing the mosaic, but you just have to stick with it. It's worth it in the end. Once I had most of my major motifs all set up on the mosaic mesh, I really needed to start putting them up on the wall. As I worked on individual sections, I would spread the tile adhesive in that area. Pressing firmly, you can see how the adhesive comes up through the mosaic mesh. It was quite a relief, really, for me to realize I could put a little element on and then add another element to it and build it that way so that I wasn't craning my neck always putting little tiny pieces vertically on the wall. I could work flat, develop it, make a few changes here and there, glue it down, let it dry, and then just press it up on the wall. Kind of like putting stickers on the wall. Eventually, I did have to work vertically. I had a wonderful ladder arrangement, and I played books on tape, and I spent hours and hours cutting pieces to fit in all around my motifs to give the whole mosaic its final surface. This ended up being actually a very creative process because I played with the direction of the tile. I could use my full squares most of the time, and so I wasn't caught up in cutting quite as frequently as when I was doing the motif. Here you can see some sloppiness, areas where I put too much of the adhesive down or it spilled over on the tiles. I was able to clean and scrape off most of that spillover and ooze through. It all worked out well in the end. The thing about grouting is it ruins your nail polish. Once I gave the adhesive, tiles, and everything time to cure, you do have to wait between each stage. I was ready to do the grouting. I believed I used a non-sanded grout, but I'll have to check. In any case, I wanted my grouting to be colored, so I used acrylic paints basically mixed in with the grout mixture to have colors. I didn't want to have it be a kind of all white between the tiles or all brown or whatever. So you can see here I used some pinks, I had some lavender color in there. At first, when you put the grout on, it spills over and it looks really messy, but afterwards you sponge it off and it comes out very clean and nice. One thing I was disappointed in it was that even though I felt like I put a lot of coloring in with the grout, when it dried, it was a lot lighter than I thought it would be. But the color was still there, and overall, I wasn't too disappointed. Here you can also see the variety of sizes and shapes of the glass tiles. I also had a slight problem because some of my tiles were thicker than the others. I had ones that were about an eighth inch, some went up to almost a quarter of an inch. But when I did the grouting, I was able to smooth over. I also want to show this. Remember in the beginning I said I wasn't sure how much I should order of each color? Well, I ran out of white, so I had to send in for another order for white and wait for that one last section to be completed. It took a couple of weeks. Patience. Remember that ugly wall?